The 2026 FIFA World Cup is being celebrated as the biggest World Cup in history. 48 teams, 104 matches, 3 host countries. A new era for the beautiful game. On the surface, it sounds perfect. More nations, more hope, more football, more global excitement. To many people, the expansion of the World Cup feels like progress. And in some ways, it truly is. More countries will experience the magic of the tournament. More fans will feel included. More stories will be told. But hidden behind the excitement is a difficult question. What if the biggest World Cup in history also creates the biggest problem football has ever faced? Because the truth is, bigger does not always mean better. Sometimes, bigger means heavier. Heavier on the players. Heavier on the schedule, heavier on the meaning of qualification, heavier on the quality of the games, heavier on the soul of the tournament itself. So tonight, we look beyond the celebration, beyond the marketing, beyond the official slogans, beyond the bright stadium lights. And we ask a simple but uncomfortable question. What is the hidden problem with the 48-team World Cup? To understand the problem, we need to understand what exactly has changed. For decades, the World Cup featured 32 teams. It was a compact structure, built around scarcity. Reaching the tournament already meant something extraordinary. Group stage failure was brutal. Knockout football arrived quickly. The margin for error was narrow, and that pressure gave the competition its famous intensity. In 2026, the format changes. There will now be 48 teams, divided into 12 groups of 4. The top 2 from each group will qualify for the knockout stage, along with the 8 best third-place teams. Then comes a round of 32, followed by the usual knockout rounds all the way to the final. The tournament will run from June 11 to July 19, 2026, and the winning team will need to survive 8 matches to lift the trophy. Source.
At first glance, it seems like a fair compromise. More teams, but still 4 team groups. More opportunity, but still plenty of tension. But hidden inside that new structure are several deep problems. The first problem is simple. The group stage may become less dangerous. And if the group stage becomes less dangerous, the World Cup becomes less special. Think about what made the old format so powerful. In a 4-team group with only 2 qualification spots, almost every match felt sharp. Teams knew that one careless draw or one defensive mistake could send them home. There was fear in every decision, urgency in every attack, pressure in every minute. Even giants could collapse early if they made the wrong start. That danger created drama. But now, with third-placed teams also able to qualify, some teams may no longer play to win first. They may play simply not to lose badly. Survival becomes more mathematical. Caution becomes more tempting. Coaches may decide that control matters more than ambition. Instead of attacking football, some group matches may become exercises in calculation. And when calculation takes over, emotion suffers. The World Cup was never meant to feel comfortable. It was supposed to feel ruthless. That ruthlessness gave it beauty. The second hidden problem is competitive imbalance. On paper, expanding the tournament gives more nations a chance. That sounds fair. But football is not equal across the world. Some countries have deep talent pools, strong domestic systems, world-class academies, elite medical departments, and global stars playing at the highest level every week. Others are still developing. Some will arrive at the World Cup with genuine ambition. Others may arrive simply grateful to be there. This creates an uncomfortable reality.
More teams can also mean more mismatches. That does not mean smaller nations do not deserve their chance. They absolutely do. Football belongs to everyone. But the World Cup has always balanced inclusion with elite tension. If the gap between the strongest and weakest teams becomes too wide, some matches may lose intensity before they even begin. And the danger here is subtle. The tournament may become larger,
But some parts of it may feel thinner. More content, but less edge. More flags, but fewer matches that truly feel historic. And that leads to the third problem. The value of qualification may change. One of the greatest achievements in world football has always been qualifying for the World Cup. Entire generations are remembered because they carried their nation there. It meant surviving one of the hardest selection systems in sport. It meant belonging to a rare circle. It meant prestige. But when access expands dramatically, prestige can shift. Qualifying will still matter, of course. It will still be a source of pride. But it may no longer feel as unreachable as it once did. And when something becomes less rare, it becomes emotionally different. This is not just about statistics. It is about meaning. Part of the World Cup's power came from the idea that only the chosen few made it. That rarity made the tournament feel sacred. The more football opens the gates, the more it must ask whether the emotional weight of entry is being diluted. And now we arrive at perhaps the biggest hidden problem of all: player overload. This is the problem that could affect every match, every team, every story, and every dream.
Modern footballers already live inside a brutal calendar. League football, domestic cups, continental tournaments, international breaks, travel, recovery, training, commercial duties, pressure from clubs, pressure from fans, pressure from federations, pressure from the media. The elite player is no longer just an athlete. He is a non-stop performer inside a machine that never sleeps. Now place that player inside a bigger World Cup, with more teams, more media obligations, longer travel demands, and one extra knockout round. What happens? Fatigue happens. Injuries happen. Caution happens. Rotations happen. Late tournament decline happens. We love to imagine the World Cup as a stage for the very best football. But tired legs do not produce the best football. Broken rhythms do not produce the best football. Mentally exhausted players do not always create beauty. And that matters, because the World Cup is not supposed to be ordinary football. It is supposed to be elevated football. If expansion creates exhaustion, then the tournament risks hurting the very quality it is meant to celebrate. And here is where the geography of 2026 makes this problem even more serious. This tournament will not be played in one country. It will be hosted across the United States, Mexico, and Canada, with 16 host cities spread over vast distances. That means players may face not only more matches, but more travel complexity. Different climates, different stadium conditions, different altitudes, different time zones, different recovery challenges, different crowd environments, different media expectations. Travel is not neutral. Travel drains the body. Travel changes preparation. Travel steals energy from training. Travel affects sleep. Travel affects focus. And at the elite level, small physical disadvantages become massive competitive differences.
One team may enjoy a smoother path through the geography. Another may suffer a more demanding route. That introduces a form of imbalance that goes beyond tactics and talent. It becomes a question of tournament design and physical burden. And still, the machine keeps getting bigger. Why? Because expansion is not only a sporting decision, it is also an economic decision. A bigger World Cup means more tickets sold, more matches broadcast, more sponsors activated, more content created, more cities involved, more tourism, more attention, more advertising, and more money. We should not be naive about this. Football is a business as much as it is a passion. And once business logic enters the heart of tournament design, difficult trade-offs appear. Are we expanding because the sport truly benefits? Or are we expanding because the global market rewards scale? Maybe the answer is both. But even if both are true, the tension remains. Because what is good for revenue is not always good for football purity. And what is good for television inventory is not always good for players.
there is another hidden problem that is less physical and more emotional: narrative overload. One reason the classic World Cup felt so powerful was because its structure was easy to feel. Fans could emotionally map the tournament. The groups mattered. The knockout stage arrived with force. The story moved quickly. The identities of favorites, underdogs, villains, and heroes emerged with clarity. But in a 48-team tournament with 104 matches, the emotional map becomes harder to hold. There are more matches to follow, more storylines competing for attention, more teams trying to establish identity, more moments at risk of being forgotten because another match arrives too quickly. When there is too much football, some football disappears in the noise. This is the paradox of abundance. The more content you create, the harder it becomes for each piece of content to feel unforgettable. Will the 2026 World Cup still produce iconic moments? Of course it will. But will all parts of the tournament feel equally essential? Probably not. And if the early phase of the tournament starts to feel like a flood rather than a crescendo, the old emotional architecture of the World Cup could weaken. Then there is the issue of football identity. The World Cup has always stood apart from club football. It was rare, concentrated, and sacred. It felt like a temporary suspension of ordinary time. Every 4 years, nations stepped into a ritual larger than sport. That rarity protected the magic. But modern football is increasingly driven by constant availability. More competitions, more tournaments, more international events, more content every week, more football everywhere all the time. In that environment, the World Cup risks becoming part of the endless cycle instead of a break from it. And that is dangerous, because when the most special event starts to resemble the logic of every other big event, it may lose some of the distance that made it legendary. The hidden problem, then, is not only that the World Cup is getting bigger, it is that the World Cup may be becoming more ordinary in structure, even while becoming more extraordinary in scale. That is a very strange transformation. Now, to be fair, there is another side to all of this. Expansion may also unlock beauty. More nations means more representation. More representation means more dreams. More dreams means more stories. And football, at its best, is the sport of possibility. A child in a country that once felt invisible may now grow up believing the World Cup is within reach. A national team with little historic power may suddenly become the symbol of a continent's hope. New fan cultures may reshape the emotional landscape of the tournament. That matters deeply.
In fact, it may be the strongest argument in favor of expansion. Football should not belong only to those who inherited power. It should also belong to those who fight for visibility. So the hidden problem is not that expansion is evil. The hidden problem is that expansion creates a conflict between inclusion and intensity, between openness and quality control, between commercial growth and sporting strain, between global fairness and tournament purity. And football has not yet proven that it can perfectly solve those contradictions. Maybe 2026 will be a triumph. Maybe the larger format will deliver unforgettable chaos, new heroes, and an even richer global football culture. Maybe the fears will prove exaggerated. Maybe the underdogs will electrify the stage. Maybe the new structure will feel thrilling rather than bloated. But maybe not. Maybe the group stage will feel softer. Maybe the calendar will feel heavier. Maybe player fatigue will shape the outcome. Maybe some matches will pass without emotional weight. Maybe the tournament will feel larger, but less sharp. And if that happens, football will have learned an expensive lesson. That the World Cup can grow in size while shrinking in tension. That the language of progress can sometimes hide the loss of something precious. That not every expansion is a victory. Still, perhaps the most fascinating part of all this is that nobody really knows. We are standing at the edge of an experiment, one of the biggest experiments in the history of global sport.
A 48-team World Cup across 3 nations is not a small adjustment. It is a reinvention. And reinventions are always risky. They promise a better future, but they can also expose hidden weaknesses. This is why 2026 will be watched so closely, not only by fans, but by coaches, clubs, broadcasters, sponsors, players, and football administrators everywhere. Because this tournament will not only crown a champion, it will judge a new model. If the model works, this bigger version of the World Cup may become the accepted future forever.
If it fails, the football world may spend years trying to recover what was lost. And perhaps that is the real hidden problem with the 48-team World Cup. Not any single issue on its own. Not the travel, not the fatigue, not the group stage math, not the commercial pressure, but the fact that so much is being changed at once. Too many variables, too many moving parts, too much stress placed on the most sacred tournament in football. Great traditions can evolve. They must evolve. But when evolution happens too quickly, even strong institutions can wobble. The World Cup has survived wars, political tensions, generational shifts, tactical revolutions, and the rise of the digital age. It remains the most emotionally powerful tournament in sport because it has always known how to combine scarcity, excellence, national pride, and myth. Now it is testing a new formula, a formula based on more. More teams, more games, more countries, more scale, more access, more money. The hidden question is whether more will also mean better, or whether football, in its hunger to become larger, is risking the very intensity that made the World Cup great. When the tournament begins in June 2026, millions will focus on the stars, the goals, the favorites, and the drama. But underneath every match will be another story. A story about structure, a story about limits, a story about what football chooses to value. Do we value inclusion enough to accept a different kind of tournament? Do we value quality enough to question expansion? Can the World Cup be both more global and still just as sharp? That is the puzzle. And until the games are played, the answer remains hidden. Maybe that is why the 2026 World Cup feels so fascinating. Because it is not only a championship, it is a test. A test of players, a test of systems, a test of logistics, a test of football's future. And like all great tests, it carries risk. The risk that the biggest celebration in football could also reveal the game's deepest modern problem. That football keeps asking for more from everyone. More effort from players, more money from fans, more attention from audiences, more growth from the tournament. And eventually, every system reaches a point where more becomes too much. The 2026 World Cup may prove that football can handle this expansion. Or it may reveal that even the world's most beloved sport has limits. Either way, one truth is already clear. The 48-team World Cup is not just a bigger version of the old tournament. It is a different tournament. A tournament with a different rhythm, different risks, different rewards, different consequences. And once that difference is fully seen, football may never look at the World Cup in quite the same way again. So when the world gathers for the biggest World Cup ever, remember this. The greatest danger is not always visible. Sometimes the biggest problem hides behind the brightest celebration. And in 2026, football is about to find out whether expansion is the future of the game or the beginning of a very complicated new era.